Well, after that, all I can say is Jesse really fucked up in not listening to Fiore and Deblanc. Hey guys, Camera for Preachers, Season 1, Episode 6, Sundowner, and holy shit, this episode. I mean, I thought last week's episode was big. No, this, guys, oh my god, I mean, I love last week's episode. Last week's episode showed me why I love Preacher, but this episode reminded me of how great the show can really be. I mean, this episode was just incredible. There were so many things that happened in this episode, so many reveals. This kind of felt like it was the, halfway point. It really did. Even though last week's episode was episode 5, this kind of feels like the halfway point. This really feels like things are really starting to happen, and I'm really loving that. Plots are starting to come together, and I'm just loving every second of it. There's so much stuff to talk about in this episode. Really, where do I begin? I mean, this episode is probably the most stuff we've had to talk about since the first episode, honestly. I mean, there's been so much going on, and stuff is also starting to get revealed, so that's really awesome. But let's just get into this episode, which the first 20 minutes of this episode is one scene in this hotel room, and it's really cool the way it's done. Basically, we open up at the flavor station, right where the last episode left off. Well, actually, not where the last episode left off, because last week's episode ended off with Odin. But in Jesse's terms, of course, we know that he met up with Deblanc and Fiore, and we finally find out what's going on. Basically, they tell him that the thing inside of him isn't God, but that it's a mistake. And obviously, he wants more details, as do we. And like I said, one of the coolest things about this is that we don't know what's going on either. So as Jesse's getting this information, so are we, and I love that. So basically, Deblanc insists, that's really none of his business, and they tell him that it should never have been used under any circumstances, but he uses it to get them to tell him what it is, obviously, because he needs to know. He needs to know the answer. He's not going to take no for an answer. Deblanc tells him that it's called Genesis, and I love that we have a name, and basically we find that somehow during the war between heaven and hell, an angel and demon fell in love, married in secret, had sex, and bore a child, and that child is Genesis, and that is what Jesse holds. So it's definitely not at all God. It's kind of a mix between the two, which is kind of what I was thinking. I was thinking it's, good and bad, and Deblanc goes on to say, Genesis is the most powerful entity in existence and could shift the balance of power and destroy all creation, and Fiore basically, could destroy all creation, so now we pretty much know what's going on. I love that we finally found out what Genesis is. After waiting for so long, we now finally know what his power is, and I'm just happy that we know now, because it's just great that we actually have a name now. It's great that we can not just say Jesse's powers, we know what's going on, and like I predicted, I've never heard of this before. This is an original thing. I like the Preachers doing this. I like that it's not, just like I said, a werewolf or just some kind of demon. It is Genesis. I think it's really cool. And then we get to the awesome stuff where we see Fiore notices this woman who's just casually eavesdropping, and she's just listening in on their conversation. We don't know why, but she exits the flavor station, and they follow her into the parking lot because they know something's up. She's listening to their conversation. They know something's going on there, and they argue, and then they attack they straight on attack the woman, which was insane to watch, but they literally just start attacking this woman, and Jesse sees them just beating the shit out of her, so he runs outside, fights them off. The woman then turns on him, and we realize that she's supernaturally strong. She starts choking him out, and Deblanc and Jesse at the same time until Fiore shoots her through the head, and they put the body in the car. They tell Jesse that they didn't kill her, and another of the same one materialized in the flavor station and comes after them again, and it's just crazy. The Fiore then realizes that he left his car keys in the flavor station, so they all take off in Jesse's truck, and just an awesome way to start things off, but it doesn't end there. We see in the trunk, Deblanc and Fiore explain to Jesse that the woman is one of the Seraphim, which is a higher order of angel, which is, again, I don't think is something that we've heard of before, and that their phone is a direct line to heaven that only works for those with angel hands. So now I think we know what the hell phone was all about. That was most likely an angel warning them that, hey, the Seraphim's on the way, or was the Seraphim calling them? That's what I think it was. If they would have picked up that phone and answered, I don't think the Seraphim would be there. I think that's really what it is. And again, we know that obviously the cowboy is connected to this. Now, we didn't see the cowboy in this episode. We know that definitely Graham McTavish's character, he's connected. And the Seraphim then takes Fiore's keys and opens their car. She finds a holy Bible inside with the address of the Sundowner Hotel. Now, you know that something's going to happen here because they put in big letters, Sundowner Hotel. So you know something's going to happen, and also it's the title of this episode. So at the hotel, Fiore and Deblanc explained that they're actually wanted for coming to Earth without permission. And Jesse figures, and I like that we found this out, that they're not supposed to come to Earth. That's what's going on, that they're wanted for that, and that's what the call was about. And that's also why they were trying to keep the situation as controlled as possible, mainly because they knew that they were being hunted, and they didn't want to make it seem like they were the ones answering the phone. So now it all starting to make sense, and suddenly things aren't as weird, and I like that. So Jesse figures that he can use the Genesis. He figures that he can just use that, but Deblanc explains that both sides were embarrassed by Genesis, and that an agreement was made, and that no one can know the Genesis is out. So Deblanc tells Jesse that he needs to sing to Genesis to get it to come out, and it's a crazy scene. Fiore literally destroys their phone, so that way they can't get contact. There's a knock at the door, the Seraphim then bursts in, shoots Deblanc and Fiore, and it's such a cool scene. Jesse then fights the Seraphim long enough for Fiore to reinvigorate and attack it again. The Seraphim then kills Fiore again. Fiore then comes back, tries to stop Jesse, but Jesse kills the Seraphim. Fiore kills Deblanc so that he can reinvigorate. They all prepare for the Seraphim to come back, and I think this was the perfect amount of really quirky, but also really intense, and I think they did a really good job with that, and only Preacher could do something like that. Deblanc then tells Jesse that they need to restrain it and not kill it, because they just can't kill it, and the Seraphim attacks them through the walls. Jesse shoots her, kills her again, it reinvigorates inside the hotel room, they fight again. Such an awesome scene. I love the way this was done, and it was all in one take. It was so cool the way they did that. I really did love that. Awesome stuff there. The bodies then pile up in the room. Cassidy shows up, shoots the Seraphim in the head, and luckily Cassidy saves the day. So I like that Cassidy was back with Jesse in this episode. We knew that he kind of went off on his own in this episode, but he's back with Jesse, and she reinvigorates. They keep fighting Cassidy, until Cassidy finally knocks her out, and Fiore then disarticulates her with a chainsaw, and Fiore and Deblanc explain that they are Genesis custodians, but it escaped, and they don't know how, nor, they know why it chose to inhabit Jesse. Obviously, there's something inside Jesse that it wants, and they don't really know what it is, and I like that they have this uncertainty. They don't really know why it's after Jesse. All they know is that it is after Jesse. Why it is, they have no idea. They just know it is, and I really like seeing that. But Jesse says that he's keeping Genesis, and he's not just going to give it to them. He's enjoying the power that he has, and probably is the worst mistake that Jesse could have made in this episode. I mean, especially because what ends up happening at the end, really, this is probably the worst thing he could have done. So basically, they don't know why he chose to inhabit Jesse, and they try to tell him that God doesn't want this, that definitely this is not what God would want, and we know how religious Jesse is, but because of how stubborn he is, he says that if God wants Genesis, he can come and get it, and I love this. I love that Jesse's just not going to say, look, I'm going to give you my powers. No, he's enjoying his powers, and it's actually helped him thus far. Think about it. It's helped Odin, believe in God. It's helped, it's helped Eugene's father. It's helped everyone, really, in some way, and really, it hasn't backfired for him yet. That is until this episode, which we'll get into. But basically, they try to tell him that God doesn't want this, but the angels then follow him outside until he uses Genesis to tell him to stay away from him, and he doesn't want them there. They basically go out on their own because he does not want them to constantly tell him that they need Genesis back. And I like seeing that. We get some good stuff with Eugene this episode, though, as well, which I really enjoyed. And I like that it cuts to black because you're thinking it's going to go commercial, and it doesn't. It was kind of like a movie the way they did that. But we see Eugene's at school. His locker has "die" scrawled in it right after two kids come up to him. And the way they get us to feel for Eugene is not like they have in the other episodes. Now, we've seen that everyone really does hate Eugene. We saw that he has the word "die" in his room and things like that. We also saw that, Root even doesn't really want his son to exist. And really, in this episode, I mean, you can really see what Eugene's really going through, and you really do start to see how this affects him even in school, and I like seeing that. So Emily's in taking care of her sick daughter. The doorbell rings, and it's none other than Tulip, who barges in as good at, like Tulip does, which I don't really think anyone could have done that except Tulip. She looks around, she yells at Emily to stay away from Jesse, and literally just yells, "Stay away from my boyfriend," and she breaks this art thing from Emily's daughter, but then she leaves, and after cleaning up Tulip's mess, Emily obviously looks out the window and sees Tulip still sitting in her car. Emily goes outside, yells at Tulip for breaking her kid's art thing. Obviously, she's really pissed about it, and then goes back inside. Tulip knocks again. She offers to fix the art thing, and we, after that, get some really good interplay between these two. I'll get into a bit later. I just thought that was really awesome, and We're then introduced to this character of Miles, who listens to a message on his machine. It's from Green Acres, wondering what happened to the representatives that Odin met with, because obviously we know that Odin killed all of them. Odin killed all of those representatives, and they're kind of fucked right now. We know that. We know that they're fucked. Miles doesn't really know what happened, and Emily then offers Tulip a drink while she's working on the art thing, and they make very awkward small talk because they don't really know what to talk about. And I like that they're just casually having a small talk. That was actually pretty funny the way that was done. But Jesse and Cassidy then stay in their underwear. They watch their bloody clothes in the washer, and Jesse tries to catch up with what Cassidy's been doing over a beer, because obviously they haven't seen each other in a while. So I like that we had a little bit of time to catch up. Even though this episode is very big, it also has these really nice small moments. It really was just like I said, all really went together very well, and Cassidy asks about a skull tattoo on Jesse's back, and Jesse says it's a mean old lady that gave it to him, and he asks about a flower tattoo on Jesse's shoulder. Jesse says it's his Tulip, and, there's Tulip out there, so I think that's interesting. Cassidy wonders what Jesse's going to do about Genesis, because obviously he doesn't want to give it to Fiore and Deblanc, so what's he going to do? Jesse says he plans to keep it, saying he doesn't need to listen to anyone but God, and he's surprised to find that Cassidy is still very skeptical after meeting angels. He still doesn't believe in God, we see, and it's interesting. I think it's really interesting that Cassidy doesn't still have his faith, and Jesse plans to keep going as he has been, saying that really nothing has changed, and he feels that everything is still the same. I really think it's going to change after this episode, but right now, Jesse is still, the stubborn preacher that he is, and some kids then sit with Eugene at lunch. They're much to his own surprise. He's surprised that he actually has friends. Now, granted, they are all young children, but it's kind of sweet just to see some people actually be nice to Eugene, especially after we see how much shit he's been through and how much people shit on this kid. I mean, we have to remember, Eugene's just a kid. I mean, he never meant for any of this to happen, and I actually like seeing him get to sit with some kids for a chance. It was actually kind of sweet, and Tulip then tells Emily about how she once slashed Elizabeth Taylor's tires for leaving a bad tip while she was out in LA, which, again, just as crazy as that is, it's something Tulip would do, definitely. She remembers traveling all over the country with Jesse, and we get a little catch-up with these two, which I really did like seeing. It appears that the whole thing between Cassidy and Tulip was merely a one-night stand. Tulip clearly didn't really feel much of it. She doesn't even mention Cassidy in this episode, but you do get the sense that Cassidy definitely is not over her. And that was something I was worried about. I was worried, is this going to be something where they never talk about it? Oh, no, it's not that. It's that Tulip clearly does not have the feelings for Cassidy that Cassidy does for, that Cassidy does for her. Definitely, I think that's what it is, and I think we definitely see that here. But we then see that she remembers traveling all over the country with Jesse. Emily's daughter calls for her. Emily takes care of her. Tulip watches her from the kitchen. Emily comes back. They talk about how Jesse is all of a sudden really popular, and she doesn't understand it. That's also because Emily doesn't know all the power that Jesse's going through, and, she doesn't know about Genesis at all. So, basically, Tulip offers to watch Emily's kid while Emily gets things done for Sunday, and Emily's very hesitant about that. She doesn't even know. I mean, obviously, this woman just barged into her house. I mean, really, it's probably not the best idea to let her watch her kids, but Tulip insists, so Tulip tells her she had a kid once, and Tulip offers to do the church stuff for her instead, and Emily agrees, and you do see that Tulip is reasonable. Tulip's not a bad person. She'll just do whatever she can to get what she wants, and that's what she did, and I kind of like the way that both Jesse, Tulip, and Cassidy are very similar in that way. They each do different things to get what they want. Jesse through Genesis, Tulip through appeasement, and also through appeasement and, kind of irrational matters, and then Cassidy through just straight up killing people. That's how they get their way. I think it's really interesting, and I think we're seeing that very well. So against Cassidy's warnings, Jesse mounts a speakerphone to the outside of the church, and we don't know what he's going to do. Again, Cassidy doesn't really think this is going to work. He really feels this isn't going to work at all, but Jesse, again, is very determined, and we definitely see that. So Emily then runs down everything that needs to be done for church with Tulip, and Tulip takes off, and it seems like she actually genuinely seems to trust her. I was actually surprised. Actually, Emily's actually trusting her. This is interesting. So the same kid at school has been strangely kind to Eugene, invites Eugene to come see something awesome, and I'm like, what exactly is he taking him to see? I thought this was going to be really bad. I thought Eugene was going to get beaten up. I'm like, please don't beat up Eugene. I already feel terrible for this kid. We had a whole episode last week about how bad Eugene, the circumstance Eugene is going through, and how much shit he's been through. But basically, Eugene, this boy, and two other boys bike to a fenced-off tunnel. They enter through a break in the fence, and they actually set up a firework in the tunnel, and it's interesting to see the way that was done. Also, of course, for the 4th of July, I think they're trying to be festive in that way, so Jesse's then setting up chairs outside the church. Miles shows up, and Jesse can tell that something is definitely wrong. He doesn't know why Miles is there, he just knows something's wrong. He asks Miles about it, and Miles tells Jesse he's thinking of doing something really wrong. He says doing what's right is worse and that it will hurt more people, and he asks Jesse how he knows what the right thing to do is, and Jesse tells him to pray, and Miles asks how he knows what's God and what's his own voice, because he knows, obviously, of Jesse's powers. Jesse tells him it's not the same and that he knows the difference. Jesse tells him that either he and God or the saying the same exact thing, or he's not hearing God at all. Basically, that's what's going on. So, Tulip arrives with church stuff. Miles leaves. Tulip then goes inside, and Cassidy finds her, and she wonders what he's doing there, and he tells her that he's working there, and you can tell there definitely is some tension between these two. Again, we don't know what happened between them. You can definitely tell whatever happened the previous night was simply just a fling, and whatever, spark there was between them is kind of gone for her. For him, not so much, but for her, definitely. So he hears Jesse calling for her, and realizes that she's his Tulip, and it's such a good scene. The look on Cassidy's face, just realizing that they both like the same girl. It's not necessarily a look of betrayal, it's more a look of, fuck, we both like the same girl, I don't know what I'm gonna do now, because I don't think Cassie just wants to, straight up kill or attack Jesse. I don't think that's really what he wants to do here. I think he's really conflicted with what he wants to do, because he likes this girl, but he also knows that that's Jesse's girl. And, of course, I think the song Jesse's Girl should have played in the background here, because I think that's pretty much Cassidy's anthem right now. But, anyway, I like that this isn't really a love triangle. I like that this isn't, them both fighting for Tulip, because Jesse doesn't necessarily still want to be with Tulip, but he does still have those feelings, sure, you can definitely tell. And he asks what Tulip is doing there. She explains, then points that Jesse kept a certain golf club. He insists he just forgot to throw it out, and it's honestly kind of a sweet scene. I like the way that was done. Definitely thought that was really good, and I definitely really enjoyed that scene overall. Really good stuff there. The crowd then gathers outside for church on Sunday. Emily tells Jesse that Eugene is outside with something important to say, but Jesse says that he'll just talk to him later, because obviously he figures that, he needs to, his main concern, again, is the church, focusing on the church, and that's what he does. He focuses on the church. That's what matters to him, is God, and Jesse senses Emily's disapproval at his methods despite the crowd. He thanks her for everything, says that she and Tulip have done a great job. She sends in Eugene, and then we get what is by far the most shocking thing we have seen in the show so far. One of the most heartbreaking, but also I think the reality check for Jesse, without a doubt. So like I said, Jesse, decided to keep his powers. He decided to keep them mainly because nothing's gone wrong for him so far. That is until this scene happens. I think pretty much everything that Jesse has thought about Genesis pretty much backfires after this, because I don't think he realized that he could really do this, because Eugene's very hesitant to tell Jesse what's wrong. He says he wants Jesse to take it back, what he did for him with Mrs. Loach, because, again, he knows that what he did isn't really real, and he says that he's given it a lot of thought, and he doesn't want it. He's actually doesn't want Genesis, and he says he doesn't want to be forgiven. He says, look, he doesn't want God to forgive him because he feels that God would not like that, and I think it's very interesting, because he really feels that God, doesn't want to forgive him for that, and at least not how Jesse did. He thinks it's cheating, and I think this is really the first person that's told Jesse that you're wrong with what you're doing. I mean, yeah, Fiore and Deblanc basically said we want it, but no one straight up told Jesse you're wrong. Eugene is telling him he's wrong. I've said it before, Eugene and Jesse are in very unique circumstances in the sense that they both are ridiculed for something. Jesse in the sense for his church, no one really understands the amount of faith and why he has the faith that he does, while Eugene, of course, is ridiculed for his deformity. Everyone thinks that he should be dead. Everyone calls him Arseface, and Jesse, meanwhile, he's in this circumstance where, like I said, he's obsessed with religion and no one really seems to understand or have the passion for faith that he does. And I love that Eugene is the person to call him out and say, look, you're wrong here. And Jesse says Eugene's hard to please, wonders what it'll take to make him happy. Eugene says he didn't ask Jesse to make him happy. Jesse gets very angry, says it's definitely not cheating. He says it's God's will what he's doing. He says he's about to save the town. He says he's going to make people see the light. And I feel like this is what Jesse wants thing. I don't actually think that he is doing doing this. I think Jesse deep down is thinking, okay, this is what I want to do, but I don't actually think he's doing this. Eugene says that he can't make people see the light. It's just not possible to do. If people aren't seeing the light now, they never will. And honestly, I get what Eugene is saying, that if they don't see the light now, they really never will. And basically, he tells them that it's a sin and that people will eventually have to choose. He says then that's the whole point. Jesse becomes very frustrated, uses Genesis. He tells Eugene to go to hell because of Genesis. Eugene literally seems to go to hell. He disappears, and I'm assuming he's dead. I'm assuming that Jesse just killed Eugene, and the way that Jesse just looks at what happened, we see just a falling pamphlet. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking this happened, but like I said, this is Jesse's reality check. This is Jesse realizing how dangerous his powers are and what, how, literal they are as well. I mean, he tells someone to do something, they will literally do it. I've said before, if he says fuck yourself, you'll literally fuck yourself. That's how it is. It's really weird, but that's how Jesse's powers work. I mean, that is why Odin is the way he is. That is why Eugene. That is why things have happened with Roots. That is why things are going on there. That is why a lot of things are happening right now. And I really think these powers, while Jesse thinks they're good, they're really just making things worse. I mean, think of how manufactured this audience is right now. Think about that. It's really a manufactured audience for the church. It's not anyone that really approves that. And I think we really saw that here. But basically, at the end of this episode, we see Miles at the site of a horrible car accident. Bodies are burned to a crisp. He calls Green Acres to tell him about it. We are to assume this is the work of Odin, but that is the way the episode ends. Amazing stuff overall. Let it just get into this because holy shit, this was a game changer. Like I said, guys, this is the episode that reminded me why I love Preacher so much. I mean, not that last week's episode wasn't amazing. Last week's episode was a great dialogue-driven episode, as well as that awesome opening scene with the cowboy. I thought that was awesome. This episode just tied everything together. We now finally have characters coming together. There aren't characters doing their own separate thing. And now we have a character dead. It seems that we've killed off Eugene. It seems that Jesse has inexplicably killed him off, and he didn't think he was going to do that. So I don't know really what's going to come out of this. If Eugene's going to come back, I don't know. We see next week there's going to be a search going on for Eugene, and Jesse's really fucked, honestly, because Jesse's the one that killed him. I don't think he's realized this, but I think Eugene is actually in hell, guys, and I don't know if there's going to be a way to bring him back. Now, I am under the assumption that if Jesse does remove Genesis, then that might undo everything that's happened, but unless he does that, Eugene's gone forever, and I don't really know if that's going to happen. I know Eugene's a very popular character in the comics, so I don't know if they actually killed him off. Right now, I'm going to say he's dead, but I feel like it's a show where if you're dead, that doesn't really mean anything. I feel like it's one of those kind of shows, but we'll have to see. But really, things have really backfired for Jesse, and he probably should have just given his power back. All you had to do, Jesse, literally all you had to do was just listen to Fiore and Deblanc and hand over your power. Then this wouldn't have happened, now would it? I mean, Jesse really, I get that he's stubborn, I get that he wants to do his own thing, and he doesn't want to listen to everyone. I'm all for that, don't listen to what other people are telling you, do what you want to do, your voice matters the most, I get that, but he really should have listened to their suggestion, because they knew what they were talking about, they knew something like this would happen, and now he really can't take it back what happened, so I don't really know what's going to happen there. Back to that awesome 12 minutes. I mean, there are so many things to just talk about in those first 12 minutes. That hole in the wall, I mean, that amazing scene, just that close-up of that hole in the wall was incredible. The way that scene is done, the way that constantly throughout that scene, Fiore and Deblanc keep getting reinvigorated. I mean, it really just showed that even though the show, there's a lot going on, it's still a quirky show. It's still weird, and I think they're doing a great job with that. That's something I definitely really love. Now that we know more what's going on, that's what I'm really enjoying, is now we just know more that's going on. It's not as mysterious. There's still a lot of mystery going on, but now we just have more of an idea what's going on, and I really love that. I like that we finally know, what's going on with Jesse, what his powers are, all that's going on there. I think that's going to be very interesting. How he ends up, like I said, now it's really backfired for him, and I really did like seeing that. So I think that really added to this episode, and just all those reveals we finally got in this episode, I'm very happy that we did. As far as Odin, I don't know what's going on with Odin. I think that definitely this is going to become a problem, especially if Odin is killing all these people. We don't know where this has come from. It seems like all of a sudden Odin is just killing all these people. I mean, bodies are being burned to a crisp. We don't really know what's going on there. I feel like Odin holds some kind of power as well, definitely. I don't know what it is, but definitely I think there's something going on with him. We don't know what it is yet, but definitely I think there's something going on there. And we'll have to see what happens there, but let's talk about Tulip, Cassidy, and Jesse, because this is a very interesting situation. You know, Tulip is back, and you can tell that her and Jesse definitely still have feelings for each other, while Cassidy's kind of third wheel right now. You know, he had something with Tulip, and now he doesn't, and he definitely, I think, wants to get that spark back, but he also is conflicted with religion. He doesn't have the deep passion that they do. Tulip and Jesse had this relationship, and he really wasn't included in it, and I think even though he wants to be included in it, he's not included, and that obviously really disappoints him, because he wants to be part of this, and he's not at all part of it, and I think that definitely sucks. I really, I think that definitely does suck. I mean, really, I feel terrible for Cassidy for what happened, but we'll have to see what Cassidy ends up doing, because I don't know if he's just going to straight up attack Jesse. I think he's probably going to handle this very delicately, because he has this bond with Jesse, and I think, is kind of intrigued by Jesse's passion for religion. I think he secretly wants it. He doesn't understand it, but I think he kind of secretly wants it, which is interesting. We'll have to see what's going on there, because that's going to be really interesting. Emily right now is the only main character that doesn't know what's going on with Jesse. So is Tulip going to inform her? I mean, Emily has no idea why he has this amount of people at the church. I mean, remember how the first episode was? All those people were not taking the church seriously, and now they are. So eventually, she's going to have to put two and two together. And I like that Emily's not stupid. She knows something's going on. She just doesn't really know what it is. I think it's a very well done character in the way that that's done. I guess my only question is, where the hell are Fiore and Deblanc going? Because obviously Jesse sent them on their way. Where are they headed, I don't really know, but I really am thinking that the cowboy Grimmatavish's character, he's going to come into this at some point. Like I said, I don't think he's going to show up to the finale, especially after this episode. I don't think he's going to show up to the season finale, but we'll have to see what happens there. Preacher was renewed for second season, thank God. I absolutely loved this episode. This is what Preacher needs to be every single week. Look, I love last week's episode. Last week's episode was a great dialogue-driven episode, but the action, between the action and the amount of things and just the amount of shit that happened in this episode, everything we found out, everything that went down, especially towards the end of the, especially for Jesse, this is what Preacher needs to be. We need to see some consequence. We need to see Jesse realize that he's making terrible choices, and I really think it's going to be that reality check for him. We'll see what happens next week. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Love your thoughts on it. Absolutely love this episode. Amazing stuff. Really been loving this show, but this is by far the best episode we've had so far. I'm sure they can top it, but I don't really know, especially those first 12 minutes. I don't know how we top that, but I'm sure we will at some point. I will see you guys in my next video, though, which will be for a movie review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.